welcome to City Talk. Delighted to have you be part of this conversation about local. Just a reminder that I happen to be in Toronto today. I was in London yesterday. The Canadian Urban Institute's located across the country, as you know. But CUI head office, historically Toronto, the traditional territory of, home now to many Indigenous, Inuit, and Métis peoples, but traditional territory of covered by Treaty 13, the Williams Treaty, and ancestral territories for the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Wendat peoples, and the Haudenosaunee. And we always encourage people to put into the chat where you're signing in from. I see someone is coming in here from Saudi Arabia. Great. Always wonderful to have an international group of folks as well. And today we're going to talk about something that's resonant to people, really, regardless of where you live, which country you live in, or where you are from. The whole idea that local opportunity, local economics, local resilience, it all boils down to local. I said to somebody the other day, riffing on Michelle Obama, when they go low, we go local, that part of the way I feel, this is largely, I don't think it's just subjective, part of the way we cope with all the noise and the confusion and the debate that seems to be occurring at the geopolitical level, way, way, way afar from where most of us have any sense of, we're not empowered and we don't have an engagement particularly. When you are being faced with that, one of the ways to reground yourself is to go into your local community and pay attention to what you see around you. And we've got folks who are coming on to talk with us about their particular perspective of how you can actually build local economies, strengthen local economies, and in turn, strengthen local places. So many of you know that CUI is active in the main street space. We're making the case that streets are the backbone of communities, whether they're in big downtowns or they're in small rural communities, that the main streets are the spines, and they often, when they intersect, become the hearts of communities. And as a result, we have continued over the last several years to start to document what do you see on main streets, what's present there, what's absent there, how do we start to open our own eyes to what we're seeing in our own main street, how it could be strengthened. We have launched mainstreetcanada.ca. Someone will put it in the chat so you can have a look. And you can go there and you can map your street. You can have a look and see what the assets are. And you can give us feedback about, what I'd really like to know about my main street that you don't tell me. Could you think about how you could get this kind of information up there or that kind? And also, as part of Main Street Canada, we put up a tariff tracker. And for us, tariffs are a proxy for economic uncertainty or economic change, obviously. And we're hopeful that the tools that we're continuing to put on Main Street Canada, you're going to hear about some of them because they're coming from partners like the ones we have today on City Talk, that there are various ways in which, as I suggest, we can become more aware of what's on our main street. We can invest in our main street. We can figure out what the gaps are in terms of what's difficult to have happen on a main street that would be better. This community would be more strengthened if we could do X or Y, and that main streets are essential infrastructure. So I'm going to ask my gang to expose their screens. Come on and join us. Welcome to City Talk, Mary, Tori, and Gwen. I don't think either any of you has been on before. Are you all first timers to City Talk?
I've been on before, so I'm
happy to be back. You're a veteran. You're a returning guest, as they say. A returning guest. We've had 275. I don't know, maybe Emily will put into the chat how many City Talks we've had. It's many. We started in April of 20 when we were all trying to figure out what the heck is going on. And we just thought, and I remember we had a call and someone said, oh, there's this thing called Zoom. I'm not kidding. It was before we all use it all the time. And we said, okay, let's sign up for that. Let's figure that out. So I always say that CUI is in the connective tissue business, trying to find ways in this vast geography called Canada. How do we learn from each other? How do we understand what's working in one place that could be adapted or copied or whatever, inspiring for another place? And I think that's part of the challenge we have, is that solutions come from places. And they're often hyper local, the solution that's going to be the most effective. And we need these channels to share with each other to see, well, what's Tori's local might be something different than what's Mary's local than Gwen's local. So we're all in that business of bridging the local to the from one to many. How do we share across? And I know that all three of you are working in places, but you're also interested in how do we get the best practice working across the country? What are the tools and all that kind of thing? So thanks for joining us. I'm going to start. We'll go west to east, as is our courtesy, because Tori, you're still working on your first cup of coffee,
You
probably.
bet.
Okay, let's go to you first, and just tell us a little bit about I'm interested. You should tell a little bit about your affiliation and why you're doing what you're doing, um, and then we can talk specifically about the particular things you're observing in this particular moment of time around the challenges that we're facing in local economies. So over to you, Tori. Thanks for joining us on City Talk.
Awesome. It's great to be here. So I'm Tori Williamson. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Buy Social Canada. We're a small social enterprise that works nationally to advance and grow social enterprise and social procurement across the country. So these moments like the tariffs and COVID, which are crappy, they suck, but they're a moment when people actually start to think about supply chains. And normally when I say the word procurement, people's eyes start to glaze over a little bit. But we're really passionate about supply chains and about purchasing because we recognize that our economic decision making through what we buy can be huge, huge potential to support whatever our goals are. We say that every single purchase has a social, economic, cultural, and environmental impact, whether you intend those impacts or not. So by thinking strategically about how you spend your money, who you purchase from, you can start to leverage a pretty significant strategic tool within the existing spend and the things that you're already buying. So we work with governments, corporations, institutions to really look at their purchasing policies. But I think in this moment right now, we're also really recognizing that even as individual consumers and purchasers, we often are already thinking about how are we spending? How do we prioritize our values in our purchasing? So I'm sure many of us love going to our local farmers markets and supporting local independent businesses. And local independent businesses are so important to our communities. You know, they're really the fabric and culture and social environment that shape our communities. And that just goes beyond the actual economic impacts of buying local, of which there are many. So we're really passionate about this. We do so much work in this area around procurement. So I'm looking forward to diving in deeper today into what the impacts of local purchasing can have and how giving some examples of how organizations are doing this.
Let's also encourage everybody on the webinar. Please post the links you're aware of too, because that's the whole point. Everything is local. It starts local, and then it bubbles, bubbles, bubbles. And so nobody has a corner on this. I always say, nobody owns an idea. Like there are many, many versions of these kinds of things, and so I'll come back to you once we've got everybody else sort of on the introducing themselves, and let's talk a little bit about how do we actually aggregate this up into because we're kind of we're salmon going against the stream here. I don't know if anybody in the chat that wants to comment on this, but we're in the middle of an election campaign, so you hear a lot of, and then we're in the middle of a trade war. So you hear lots and lots of narrative about the economy, the economy, the economy, and it's invariably about a sector. It's about the automotive sector, or it's about biomedical, or it's about oil and gas, or it's about agriculture, and it's rarely grounded in a local a place and where the economy actually lives. So we're going to come back and talk more with you about that, Tori. Mary, let's go to you next. My namesake, Mary to Mary. Mary and I always joke, well, we don't always, we've only met once, but I did joke that our name, our given name is not a very common given name anymore. Just saying. So Mary's Unite. Nice to see you. Thank you for coming on to City Talk. Describe for folks a little bit about what your particular perspective is on this.
Yeah, great. Thanks for having us. Well, me, and I know that my co-founder, Kim Lesbrance, is also on this call. So I just want to shout out to her. To the two of us, our perspective is that we know that in times of crisis, people want to do the right thing, and they're often told what that right thing is. But as we all know, there's that great big gap between an intention and an action. So you want to shop more locally, you want to support your local businesses, but what really gets you to take that extra step? And so what Kim and I did is we started right at the same time that CityTalk started, right in the middle of the pandemic, and we said, how are we going to get people to actually go and shop locally? Particularly when it was, curbside pickup only, odd hours. So we just launched a contest at the hyper local level, our 400 businesses in our area, and we incentivized people to shop locally with a chance to win $1,000 if they could produce a receipt. It was that simple. And fast forward 5 years later, we've run 68 contests across North America as far as Coconut Grove, Miami. We've really perfected the way to help BIAs help their businesses ask for the business, ask people to shop locally, and then, reward them for doing it. So ultimately, that's where we are, now. And what we're looking to do in the next couple of months, and why I reached out to Canadian Urban Institute, is just to help us, scale this now, because we're in the middle of another crisis, and we now have 5 years of experience, on how to get up to $400,000 of an economic impact in a local community by incentivizing people to shop and spend more and try new places. So we're excited to take this national with a pooled capital model, which we can talk about later.
I'm just making a note of all these sort of topics that the two of you and now a third are going to give us to chat about. And again, I'm going to encourage people to put questions in the chat and comments and have you heard of and what about and da da da. Okay, Gwen, number 3. I meant to ask you, sorry, I didn't even ask you, but Tori, where are you today?
I'm joining from beautiful Squamish, BC.
Squamish, BC. And Gwen, where are you? Sorry, yes, Mary, where are you? And then Gwen. Mary, where are you, Mary?
Midtown Toronto.
Midtown Toronto. And Gwen, where are you?
I'm joining from Waterfront Toronto.
Waterfront Toronto. Okay. All right. Well, apologies to the east. Sorry. It's not, we do know that Canada continues to exist east of Toronto. Just saying. We'll make up for it next time to make sure we have somebody from the Maritimes or from Quebec or from the north, because it's a big place. But we're happy to have the 3 of you. So Gwen, you tell us a little bit about what your particular angle is here, what your particular perspective is, and then I'm going to ask you all to put your screens on and we'll have a collective chat.
So I think our story comes a lot through Shortfast's mission, which is all about building and started to build economic resiliency on Fogo Island. And a big way we do that is through our community businesses. And a way we do that is through our own purchasing and procurement on Fogo Island and its surrounding communities. So it all started, I guess it's hard to talk about the whole story, but for those that aren't familiar, Fogo Island is a rural island off the coast of Newfoundland.
You should assume that people aren't familiar, although Zita Cobb, the founder of Shorefast and the builder of the Fogo Island, and has been on CityTalk a number of times. But let's just assume that we all know nothing. So
okay, perfect. Then I'll try to give the spiel and I'll try to be quick.
Yeah,
but
fine. Yeah.
But Shorefast was founded in 2004 to build economic resiliency on Fogo Island and to build an economic pillar in support of the primary fishing industry. And through looking at the inherent assets on Fogo Island, became very clear through the assets of hospitality, nature, and culture that tourism was such a natural fit to do so. And we started by building the Fogo Island Inn. And through building the inn, we made our purchasing decisions by everything that went into that building had to come from Fogo Island. Not Fogo Island, then Newfoundland. If not Newfoundland, then Canada. And if not Canada, then a country that shared similar labor standards or proximity to Canada. And that's how we built the inn, and that's how we continue to operate the inn and all of the other community businesses. But we were struggling to show that. And I think if you've ever looked at the inn and maybe looked at the price of the inn, you might see it and go, whoa, where does all that money go? Which is a completely rational and normal reaction to have to any price. Same with prices that might be too low. And in 2018, we were struggling and trying to figure out ways to show and display these purchasing choices and these very specific procurement policies that we had, but we're struggling to tell that story beyond just through words. And what we created and what my colleague Diane Hodgins created in 2018 was something called the Economic Nutrition Label, which was modeled after food nutrition labeling, which is a similar concept. Like tonight after work, I have the day off tomorrow. I might go to the grocery store, get some chips, and I'm not going to look at the food labeling too closely. That's not my goal. But maybe tonight I have a friend coming over and maybe that person's on a particular diet or they have an allergy, or now I need to flip over the food labeling and make some choices using the information that's there. And the economic nutrition labeling concept is built on the similar thing. When we make food purchasing choices, we have information to align to health goals. What if we could create something that could provide information to align to your other purchasing goals? And so we created the nutrition labeling, which I'm sure I'll get into, and I have some pictures ready to walk through it, but essentially is a tool to showcase where your money goes. And I'll pause there because I know we're going to dive into it much deeper.
No, that's great. Let me just get everybody's cameras on. But Gwen, do you want to just share your screen? Just show us this economic nutrition label. This is so interesting. So you slapped this label on. Talk to us about this. What is this? What does this tell us?
Yeah, I'll dive into it more now, but here, I guess I'll just go backwards. So there's the Fogo Island Inn that really inspired this to show and how we created the tool. And so we started with the in to be able to show both when we make our own purchasing decisions, but also to customers and to the community to hold ourselves accountable as to where our money is going. And this is the label that you can see on screen. The top half shows where the money is going. So this is an example for the inn, but when guests stay at the inn, you can know that over half your money doesn't leave off the ferry. It stays on Fogo Island, then 16% to Newfoundland, then Canada, and then there's a 4% international fee that goes off. Think of things like wine. We do have lots of Canadian wine suppliers, but also some off in Europe too. So that those types of purchases. And then the bottom half tells us what your money pays for. So we have salaries, room, operations costs, etc. And when we created this label, it ended up being one of the most impactful tools at the time we could have created. We've been telling this story and how we make our purchasing decisions by priority of these places, but missing the information to show it. And we found that the response, both from internal and external, had been great. And we ended up using this as a data tool for ourselves internally. So now we set benchmarks on, for example, what that Fogo Island target should be, what that salaries target to be, and use it to hold ourselves accountable to. And it grew from just being a tool available to the inn to then growing to all 5 now of our community businesses that we have. And I know I'll pause when I need to pause, but this is one for the workshops.
You're doing fine.
And Fogo Island Fish, a hand-line cod business.
Okay, so just stop at the fish for a sec.
Yeah,
So that is a piece of cod.
that is a piece of cod.
And we're saying that 70% of the value of that cod goes to the island.
Correct.
It goes to Canada, I'm assuming through taxes and stuff. A little
Correct.
bit to Newfoundland, and then I don't know, some international something, who knows? Yeah.
Yeah. So for the rest of Canada, a lot of the product is shipped to restaurants as far east as Ontario. So part of that is shipping money and other things that we can use to explain some of these choices. And this was started in 2018, has grown to all 5 of our businesses. And during that time period, we've been asked by lots of other businesses and organizations on how do we create this? How do we create this tool? And for so long, we've been Fogo Island focused, as ShoreFast has been intended to be. But throughout the period, and especially as of recent, we've gotten a lot of asks to expand this tool to other places. And now, through the launch of the ShoreFast Institute for Place-Based Economies, which we're launching at the end of this year, which is translating our 20 years of economic development experience on Fogo Island for tools for other places. This is one of the tools that we're launching now nationally through the Institute. And an exciting piece is for those businesses that want to get in early, we're opening a pilot up this summer. And there's a pilot registration link that I believe will be shared, but we're looking at businesses.
She's just posted it.
Oh, exciting. So we're looking for businesses that want to use economic nutrition, are ready to showcase these types of purchasing decisions and where their money goes. And we're looking to pilot that this summer and then have a national launch of this as a certification mark in 2026 in partnership with all those incredible businesses that sign up and are a part of it. So.
It's interesting, and we used to talk about this way about COVID, that a couple of things. One, that COVID, certain things surfaced as challenges that existed before COVID, but COVID made them big challenges, like practical things like we don't have enough bathrooms outside in public spaces or that kind of thing. And it's interesting, here we are with this economic uncertainty climate that is coming out of and manifesting as tariffs, and it's doing the same thing. It's suddenly bringing forward certain things that existed before that we weren't doing that now we're doing. So suddenly, as you know, people are going into stores and they're looking to see, well, is this from the United States or not? And it's just a very interesting moment where we're taking some time and we can influence. So this is perfect timing for a label like this, right? To be able to be reflective. Question that Richard Gould's asking, how does it show, maybe one of the other labels is a better example, how does it show if there's a profit? This says I guess it's saying what does the money pay for? Does it show, and if you're a private sector business and you're making a profit, how would it show on the label?
Right now, the profit is currently not included in the label, and there's several reasons for right now for doing so. Okay. For us, all of our community businesses, all profit are reinvested in ShoreFast, which is the charity that owns which owns all of the businesses, and then we track where our money goes now through the charity end of things. So that's the answer for all the businesses that you're seeing here. We
But
used to show
it is interesting though, when you start to work
Mhm.
with for-profit businesses,
completely.
and will they be willing to be transparent and show you that their markup is so extraordinary that they're making 70%? I mean, I don't know.
Profit,
They've got a house in the Cayman Islands. I don't know how that's gonna show.
it's a great question, and it's also a tough question because profit, I'll speak for myself. I don't necessarily see profit as always being a bad thing. When a business makes
Right.
profit and reinvesting it back in the business, and
Right.
there's different businesses of all different sizes that are all going to have different profit years. And for transparency for our businesses, many years we don't also have a profit. So then showing a deficit sometimes on some of these businesses when a lot of our local reinvestment is through our purchasing was opening us up to more, I guess, questions that defeated the point of what we were trying to get at with the label, which was about transparency and where our money is going, both physically and what it's paying for.
Yeah.
So it's a great question, and one that we are absolutely exploring through the pilot that we're launching this summer. And those are a lot of the questions that we have to ask for those maybe that want to opt in and include it, or those that don't. We're very open to that, but it's a tricky one and not one that we're going to require on those that join the pilot to
But
display this summer.
But this is why pilots are great, eh? Because it
Mhm.
exposes, oh, it would work well here, might not work so well there, or maybe it needs to look. This is why we have pilots.
Exactly.
Lynn Royce is asking you, how would it work for arts and culture organizations? So again, everybody
Yeah.
sign up at that link that Emily's put there.
Yes,
And
please sign up.
let's just totally deluge Gwen with
Yeah.
people that want to give it a try and who are curious about this, so that she's going to have a really great sample to be able to continue. But it's all about transparency and people paying attention. So let's thank you for sharing your screen. I'm going to ask
Yeah.
you to release us from that.
I
And
will.
let's get all of us on here. And I'm interested, all three of you are very entrepreneurial in your approach here. You're looking for, you have some common, I think it's the common thread is, I think, you're trying to empower the consumer to make local decisions, I think. Is that right? Would you say that's a thread? Mary, you've also got a particular initiative. I need to know how you got into this. Why are you in this?
Uh, I mean, I think just the fact that we moved to Toronto with no family, only children, had to create our community. And so it became, our neighbors, friends like Kim. And we got to know so many of the business owners, and I became very involved. And so did Kim in our local community. And so when we saw them suffering through the pandemic, we just felt a sense of, that we had the capacity. We're both lifelong marketing professionals. We knew how to do this. And so it was supposed to be just a one-off passion project. But the reason that it's gone on for so long is because what we realized that this was doing for, yes, we are empowering the consumer and trying to incentivize them to shop local more, as opposed to at online retailers only or big box stores. But our clients are the business improvement areas. We're not going directly to the businesses. We're working through the BI.
So just to be clear though, you're a for-profit business.
We are a for-profit
You're
business.
for-profit. And
Yes.
when you are a charity, right?
Correct. I work for Shorefast, which is a charity. So economic nutrition will be one of our charitable initiatives.
But Shorefast owns some businesses.
Correct. Unlike a traditional endowment, we invest through our community businesses. And then if there is a profit, that gets then reinvested through the charity.
Got it. And Tori, what is Social? Is it a business?
So glad you asked. So we're a social enterprise, and the definition of a social enterprise is a business. It sells goods, services, has an embedded social, environmental, cultural mission, and reinvests the majority of profits back into the mission. So about 85% of the social enterprises in Canada that Bisocial Canada certifies are nonprofits operating businesses, similar to what Gwen just shared about a charity. There are in BC and Nova Scotia hybrid incorporations where you can still have shareholders, but there are in the articles of incorporation, there's a requirement that 60% of any dividend payouts would have to go back into the mission instead of to the shareholder. So there's a limitation on that profit payout, as well as if there was a sale of the company, then 60% would have to go back into our mission, which is to advance and grow social enterprise and social procurement. So we operate both a CCC and a nonprofit. So it gets complicated. We do have in our network for-profit incorporations, because there's only 2 provinces that have that hybrid incorporation, who've amended their articles of incorporation to say, this is a priority. We want our business in perpetuity to exist to support our mission, and we need that to be locked into our incorporation
And a
status.
charity be part of Buy Social Canada?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got lots of charity. So charity is, again, is your tax status. So, like, you would have your
Right.
nonprofit incorporation, and then you would go for the CRA tax status. And we do see that kind of approach where Shorefest has, where you can have a charity or a nonprofit owning for profit. So the finances of it, if people want to learn more, you can check out our guide to social enterprise. We dip our toes in a little bit, but it's very interesting how that incorporation status, again, speaking to kind of Richard's comments in the chat, impact, where is the profit going in perpetuity? I think that's really important too.
And and then who owns the asset?
Who owns the assets?
So
Yeah.
Mary, just back to you. So you and your neighbor Kim, you say, oh, wow, local businesses are going to struggle through the pandemic. And as I say, these are things that predate COVID. Big box stores and chains were dominating the retail space prior to COVID, but then during COVID, it kind of went crazy. So just take us, Mary, to the journey. So you figure this out, and then how did you come up with Shop Local to Win?
Yeah, so we ran our very first contest. Kim and I put in the money to print things, and we found 2 local realtors who were willing to put in the prize purse. And we, at the end of it, just said, oh, it's coming to an end. The sponsors would probably like to know what the impact was. And so we surveyed everyone who participated, and we asked them. And the net result was $85,000 of recorded incremental spending. And
Wow.
75% of people telling us that they tried new places as well through the pandemic when it was most difficult. Then we started getting calls from other BIAs as the word spread, and it suddenly turned into my full-time job. I was in between jobs and thought, let me throw myself into this, because as Gwen said, there are different kinds of for-profit companies. And I would say that although we are so mission driven, I can tell you that there's years we haven't made a penny. We've been reinvesting almost everything into newer platforms, better processes. We've made sure from day one to pay our suppliers a fair living wage in Toronto. And we've been looking always and spending a lot of our energy on finding one major sponsor for our entire program that would allow it to be underwritten so that we could bring it to the BIAs at a hugely reduced fee. And that's what we're so happy about, being able to say that today we have found that sponsor, so that we're now going to, just at the time that we have a second crisis, we have the expertise and the experience now to take this nationally, and we now have a sponsor that's picking up the entire prize purse of $66,000 for this national contest, and allowing us to bring our program to the BIAs at 75% off.
So, I'm a huge fan of BIAs, just saying. So anybody on the chat, I suspect you're all BIA lovers with me, but I think we need to encourage our BIA friends, and I'm sure there's many of them on the chat. We need you to find another name, just saying. Or maybe you just go with the acronym, which is generally what's happening. But the business improvement area, the improvement is the part I'm struggling with, because it suggests that there's something wrong that needs to be fixed, And we do this in cities all the time. We always say, oh, we need revitalization, or we need a renewal strategy. And it always suggests that there was something wrong. That's why so there's our challenge for today, folks, is let's rename the BIAs into something else, because they're a fabulous unit of organization that works at the community level, right? Which
They're
is
hugely impactful, because people behave totally differently when something feels local. So we know that a contest, ran, in 2020 at a national level. They only had 30,000 entries for an entire contest. That's millions and millions was spent on. We get $8,000 entries when we run it in a little community, because we've figured out how to make it, really resonate with the local community. So yes, I think that BIAs are tremendously perhaps unsung heroes in especially in stepping up to deal with crises like the ones that we face, right? I mean, it was them who really activated and helped the businesses understand what to do. The businesses looked to them as experts. There's a lot on their plate.
The ideas are pouring in on the chat. Anne Marie is saying the Business Investment Association, that's maybe better. Local economy associations. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, the idea from the CUI's perspective, we're always interested in how do we get attention to the ground? How do we pull conversations and how do we make them smaller? Not less important, but just more at an operable level. So we want to make money smaller because not everybody needs $100 million. Maybe they only need 10,000 to put an awning on or something. And similarly, so that's why the BIA unit is so interesting to us. It's place-based, and it came out of a business sort of fraternity or sorority, but now it's broadened because it's not just the business that cares about it. So Tori, just back to you in terms of how long have you guys been at this? How old is Bisocial?
We're coming up on 11 years now. We celebrated our 10-year last year. Yeah.
Wow, that's
hmm
great. And tell us what you think the major challenges are to building the movement that the bisocial movement has been incubating for 11 years.
I mean, I think the momentum that we're seeing on social and sustainable procurement right now is incredible. Even since I've been with Bisocial Canada for just about over 5 years now, like organizations, people are really seeing that this is something that they can and should do. Now,
Yeah.
it's how do we do it? How do we do it well? And I think that there's so many, on an individual purchasing level, we talk about buying local, so supporting local businesses, buying from social enterprises. Mary, your type of business, I would call like a social purpose business. So supporting those types of businesses, also Indigenous businesses, there's so many things for us to do. And I think what I encourage you to do in your own purchasing, whether or not at your organization or individual level, is really look at what you're buying and what your options are. And you're not going to get everything local, as we saw in, the economic nutrition label. It's not likely possible. We are currently still in a global market. Who knows how that's going
Well,
to change?
I mean, I think this is what's interesting about the niches you guys are all identifying. It's not as if you're turning your back on the world. We're not moving back to a time of,
Yeah.
where we don't have, borders are always going to be porous and there will always be some form of trade, obviously. But these are tools to do informed decisions. So keep going, Tori.
Exactly. So it's really about looking at, okay, what am I buying? Where are the opportunities? And how can I move the needle just a little bit? What's one step I can take? And as we continue with that mindset of small wins, one after another, then it can just continue to snowball and grow and improve over time. I'm a huge fan of measurement. So I love the economic nutrition label. I love that transparency. So if you set a baseline, Bisocial Canada has measured our own social procurement spend with social enterprises and then other local businesses, social purpose businesses. And now we've got a number we can look at each year. Where is there room to improve? We saw like software is a great one, the question in the chat, where is there a Canadian like
I
video
know somebody
conferencing
is looking,
software?
what is
Yeah.
the Zoom Teams? Somebody said
So
to me the other day, maybe you gals will all be too young for this, but maybe we're going to go back to Word Perfect. Word Perfect was a word processing software program that many, many folks, I don't know if there's anybody in the chat that will reinforce this for me, but my understanding is that the legal profession loved Word Perfect. It had a much better tracking mechanism and it got overtaken by Microsoft. And so I think some people still use it, but it's rare. So
yeah.
I don't know, somebody find us a broadcast platform that is Canadian owned. We're ready to hear about it. The thing that's so interesting is we're now asking ourselves that, right? We're just asking ourselves,
Exactly.
what kind of redundancy do we have if a particular relationship is broken or just is disrupted? I shouldn't say broken, it's disrupted. So just back to Tori,
So yeah,
go
I'll
ahead.
keep going. Yeah. So
Yeah.
what we're doing though when we make those small steps is that we're increasing demand for those types of businesses. And that's core to our entire theory of change at Bisocial Canada. Like by purchasing and prioritizing from these types of businesses in your supply chain, you create the marketplace for them to grow. So more organizations prioritizing from them, more people buying from them, more local businesses, more social enterprises having incredible impact in communities. That's the whole point. So we're really just recognizing that again with each of those purchasing choices. So I think the biggest barrier is just that people can feel overwhelmed or people might not know about this or they might not know how. We can help you with all of that. We've got that covered.
We're from Bisocial Canada. We're here to help.
Yeah, we've got training, we've got consulting, we've got free guides. If you want social procurement, we're here. So I think it's really about like taking those steps, having that conversation with what's your strategic priorities and really aligning it within your organization so that this becomes a win-win. You're already spending, you already need to buy, you already probably have goals to support different community things that are priorities to your organization. So bring those two things together. So I think it's just about maintaining this over time. And maybe on the shouting out to the data side of things, as an example, in the city of Vancouver, they have a policy on really big construction projects that have goals for local procurement, social procurement, and local and inclusive hiring. So we're working on multiple projects like this where we're working to track the construction project spend and hiring. So the biggest one and the one that's been happening for the longest time is the new St. Paul's Hospital project. And so this is a huge, like,
Where is that, Tori?
it's in the city of Vancouver.
In City of Vancouver? Okay.
Big new modern hospital that's being built.
Okay.
And it's got, we're tracking, so we've got, as of last year, our most recent data, 17% of the project spend was within that city core neighborhood.
Wow.
And then 58% was in the wider Metro Vancouver area. And then 1% for BC, and then 24% outside of BC. So
That sounds like an economic nutrition label, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Sounds just like it. And, you know, for years, we were always citing the Evergreen Collaborative or Cooperative out of Cleveland, where they really focused on altering the procurement strategies of an institution, the Cleveland Clinic, to invest in local businesses. And now I'm so glad we can now start talking about the new St. Paul's project
Yeah.
in Vancouver.
And what's good is the conversations that come. So it's like about those small decisions on this type of project. So we work to support the GC and the sub-trades and looking at and measuring their supply chain, but we also support them to find businesses and connect with businesses. And we had a conversation where one of the sub-trades flagged that the current City of Vancouver building code meant that they had to buy a US made pipe. And they said, you know, there is a similar alternative that's made here in the Lower Mainland. If you can adjust and make an exception for this building code, we can buy this pipe here in the greater Vancouver area. And the City of Vancouver, overseeing the policy, said, yeah, that's approved. And so they were able to make that switch. So I think
that's
creating
a
that
good
environment.
strategy. That's import replacement, and it's a very sound it takes time, and you have to be alive to it. You have to be paying attention to it.
Yeah.
Gwen, one of the things a question I have for you about the nutrition label is, you know, it's not, I don't think it's just a coincidence that a lot of this really important work was incubated in an environment of scarcity. Fogo Island, if you haven't been there, folks, it's only 2,600 people. It's fiercely rural, and it's not a dense urban environment. And out of that necessity, and I think the process that went into the inn, where they tried to source everything as local as they could, they sort of had concentric circles. If you can find it on the island, great. If you can't, you find it in Newfoundland. If you can't find it in the region. How do you think the economic nutrition label approach will work in denser markets and more competitive markets, I guess? So I'm trying to just imagine it in a Montreal or in a Ottawa or in a Vancouver or Toronto. What do you think?
Well, we are partnering through the pilot with organizations and businesses that are in denser areas. And to be clear, economic nutrition through the Institute is one of many economic literacy tools that we're putting out. It's the farthest along because we've been using it for so long internally and have been asked to find ways to get it out there. But it's a series of tool sets on finding ways to better understand your economy.
Want to talk about some of the other ones that you're looking at?
Oh, well, some that I know that we've chatted through, but there's various ones of economic mapping. So being able to identify assets within communities, those that are both inherent and ones that we might think about and consider. And various other tool sets. But economic nutrition is the main one we're putting at now for helping with those purchasing decisions.
And I mean, it's all about, as you say, I like that literacy piece. It's also about just making visible what people don't know. It's like looking under the hood. We can't use those car analogies anymore.
Completely. And it's a tool that's there, like I mentioned, like with our food labeling. Sometimes you use it and sometimes you don't. And also I'm from Salt Spring Island, BC, and I can relate to growing up. Sometimes the economically nutritious choice for our family was my parents going off island to get groceries because they couldn't do it all the time. But making that choice was what allowed them to stay local, stay on Salt Spring Island, and remain in the economy. And that was the economically nutritious choice. So it's just additional information to use for decisions. And we have been partnering with organizations in a larger cityscape. It honestly works no different. If anything, those numbers are even going to be greater for local spend for some of those in the larger city where there are more options that are available. For example, with who we're working with in Toronto, it's going to be a very different label, look, and feel, probably with even more in Toronto than Fogo Island does, but honestly, not too much of a difference. The biggest thing that we're looking at when we are working with maybe larger businesses to small businesses is just the level of data and finding ways to make it work for the label. Because for us, SureFast is an organization of well, now over 200 employees across all community businesses, and we have a
Wow.
great accounting team. I'm an accountant, and I used to audit financial statements of many different size companies across the country, and you'd be surprised at how little do track the data of where their money is actually going. So a lot of our effort through the pilot is developing those right training materials, those right guides to help companies along their way. We're piloting additional versions, like a light version. What are other visuals that we could show? I think arts and culture was mentioned. We are wanting an organization from St. John's that does run a venue hall. We had a great conversation of what could we show now? What visuals could we create now to help show the economic spin-off from an arts and culture industry? Like the babysitting fees people have to purchase to go out for a theater, the restaurant. How could we show that spin-off while we work with them to get the data to a level where we can create the label? So there's a lot of ways in, and that's what we're working to really fine tune this summer. But the big and the small of the place hasn't been the
It's not
barrier
you
that
don't think
we
it's a
think.
deterrent. Okay, well, that's great. I mean, I think this idea of making it more visible so that we're become better informed consumers. Mary, I'm interested about the role of incentives. So your contest approach created an incentive. Why do we need an incentive?
I think because as wonderful as all people generally are, we still are motivated by self-interest. You know, we do care. And some people care more than others, but we need everybody to care. So, you know, the first time we ran our contest, it was a chance to win $1,000. And one of our neighbors walked by while Kim and I were sitting on the porch and said, "Are you going to do that contest again?" And we said, "Yeah." And he said, "You know, I wouldn't enter that contest," he said, "because I feel like my family's well off. I would rather like let other people win."
Yeah,
And so he said, "You should share the prize with the businesses." So you've got people that are just so incredibly
interesting.
altruistic,
Yeah,
but we
that's
know that
interesting.
there are so many people that are like, why, what's going to get me, you know, to go and walk down the street to get that fan instead of just ordering it on Amazon when it can be delivered to my house? And we know for a fact that this worked. Our very first winner was a 27-year-old woman who told us that she literally needed a fan. And because of the contest, instead of ordering it on Amazon, she walked down to Annie's hardware store
Well,
and bought
great,
them.
great.
Right?
Yeah.
So we know that we need incentives sometimes. We have my friend Lori, you know, lives here 25 years in the neighborhood, butchers at the end of our street, 56 years, has never set foot in the local butcher, got all her meat from, you know, the corporate store because she wanted more receipts, because she really wanted to win. She's now a loyal customer. 5 years later, she's spending a ton of money locally. So we know we need it, you know,
And
really.
we know the big guys do it. I mean, just saying, you know, there's a reason that our favorite coffee, Brazilian-owned coffee chain, that shall remain nameless, but everybody knows who they are. They have roll up the rim for a reason. Like it sells a lot of coffee. So
Oh my God, Mary.
it's another way of sort of engaging the market instinct. There's some questions coming in here about the Community Benefits Network. Judith, thank you for posting that. I was thinking about Rosemary as Tori was talking about the St. Paul's Hospital experience, because we do have a national now Community Benefits Network, and it's all about trying to think locally in every way, how we purchase, how we hire, how we promote. Just going back to the shop local to win model of incentives, any particular obstacles, Mary, to getting people to, other than you're removing some friction, you're creating a carrot, come on in and enter. Anything else that you're observing that's an impediment to people shopping local?
Um, I mean, I think that the impediment sometimes is just the reminder at point of sale.
Yeah.
You know, you make the effort to go downtown, to go down to your local store, but then you don't necessarily feel recognized. There isn't a loyalty program for the local butcher the way
Aha.
that there is
Okay.
for Shoppers Drug Mart. But
Okay.
when we get people to enter the contest, we now have their emails. We're now able to develop a relationship with them on behalf of all of the businesses on the main street. So this becomes not only an incentive, but also a loyalty program. And you mentioned Roll Up the Rim to Win. And I just want to say that, you know, many of you probably on here are too young to remember when that launched, but I'm not. And that was over 35 years ago. That's how successful.
Really?
Over 35 years, consistently running that program twice a year. And
Yeah.
that's where we're going. Our intention is to run this pilot right now in August. And our sponsor has agreed to do this twice annually, to put in $66,000 of prize money and more and we're able to bring on additional supports. And our goal is, and I hope you all feel like you were here at the beginning of something. Hopefully we are creating the roll up the rim to win for Main Streets. And it's this
Okay,
very,
well, you heard it here first. Well, but
you
there's
did.
and listen, there's room for lots and lots of ideas. So anybody else who's on this call or other people that are aware of initiatives to try to incentivize people to invest in their local economies is welcome. So let's hope that there's a whole bunch. Let's hope we're unleashing all sorts of creative things. So just going back to it's a bit of a thread that I feel like I'm pulling here because Tori, you're talking about businesses and business procurement largely, right? Not individual purchasing
Yeah, and government for sure.
and government
We
and public.
focus on the big purchasers primarily, but it applies like to consumers. It's just more regulated, and there's trade agreements and all sorts of things that make it more complicated on a big scale.
So if you, as you look at the next 90 days in Canada, and who knows what the heck is ahead of us, we'll have a transition federally, and then we've got continued transitions happening to the south and how they affect us. Are there particular regulatory steps that you think we should be doubling down on, Tori, to get this to make it easier to do the kinds of economic transactions you're promoting and that a lot of the people in the chat are reinforcing?
Um, I would say that looking at your organization level policies, because those you have complete control over. So making sure that those direct you to prioritize local businesses and social enterprises for your below threshold spends and raising your thresholds to align with the trade agreement policy threshold levels. We have a whole local briefing note on our website that talks about what public sector purchasers can do within the current trade agreements, as well, really highlighting that there is a exception allowed within the trade agreements that all governments should be utilizing, which allows them to direct award above threshold with nonprofits. So nonprofit social enterprises, there's amazing ones, especially in the construction sector, working on housing, advocating to their local governments and provinces to be doing those direct award contracts. So really utilizing that. Beyond that, on a policy level, there's multiple levels of free trade agreements. There's interprovincial ones, there's Canadian ones for all the provinces and territories, and then there's international ones. Bringing the interprovincial ones up to the same level as the Canadian free trade agreement would be a good way to have more discretion around prioritizing local in the supply chain. So those are kind of the top ideas off my head.
I mean, the thing that's so interesting is it scales, doesn't it? I mean, I know that all the mercantilists here are going to be delighted that I use the word scale. But that it can work hyper local on your block for businesses next to each other. Mary, I'm sure with the shop local to win kinds of contests, one business talks to the next business, talks to the next business, and suddenly, you're incentivizing me to make a purchase here, walk 6 doors down, make a purchase there. This kind of critical mass. Gwen, are any thinking on your part about whether or not a labeling program could grow virally like that? So if you had, let's say, one business gets the economic nutrition label, and then do you find that, well, actually 8 businesses on that street are then going to get, or gee, that part of Mile End is embracing the economic nutrition label so that more money stays in Mile End. That's a neighborhood in Montreal. Anybody thinking about that? Whether you could get a kind of
Oh, absolutely.
okay,
Absolutely.
okay,
Especially, I mean, we've always felt that way, and just through businesses that have reached out even before recent times, but we see this being a real shift towards putting places at the forefront when making all sorts of economic decisions and being able to help turn our purchases into investments in the future of the local economies of the places that we live. And we see this lasting far and beyond whatever these times are that we are in. And we're hoping that economic nutrition can be something that can grow. And so a lot of the businesses that we're looking to work with this summer through the pilot, but also as we launch nationally, we're hoping, and we've seen them already, want to be champions of this. So that it's not just us yelling about this and sharing economic nutrition and getting so excited. We're thrilled to be building a network of local procurement champions across the country, starting with Canada, that are able to share this and bring it out on a larger scale. And we can't wait.
there's got to be a way for us to do this in a way that doesn't feel jingoistic, that we're somehow because don't forget that, at least I don't want to forget that Canada is composed of all sorts of people that come from all over the world and have deep international relationships and that's part of the great strength of Canada is that people are in contact with their home countries and their family members and and you want that dense weave, right? But at the same time, this is how economies evolve and grow, is by stitching together these local relationships, and I can supply this to you, you can supply that to me, and then suddenly we start to build something fabulous together. So it's an interesting moment, isn't it, to rethink this. Someone is in the chat complaining that they're seeing too much of me. Danielle, I think that's in your settings, in your Zoom settings, because I just checked and other people are seeing the Hollywood Squares. You're only seeing me and one other person. Poor you, sorry. But you can adjust your settings so that you can see all four of us. As we sort of round the corner here, what's your gut telling you? Are we on the right side of this? Do you think we're making the progress we need to? Mary, you first.
I think organizations like yours that are hosting these kinds of conversations, I think are helping so much. I had no idea about what Gwen is doing and what Tori's doing, and already I can see synergies. I think there are some really great things happening. I think we need more dialogue like this, and I will be attending all the future City Talks. But I think what needs to happen is we need to be working on things that have a long runway, that are going to make impacts in the long term, like the things that that Gwen and Tori are talking about. And then we also need the stuff that just hits today. Immediately, it's going to have a measurable economic impact.
Both, isn't it?
Right? So I think it's just making sure that we're supporting things that are doing lots of different things, and we're hoping our program, that this pilot generates $15 million of measurable economic impact. And what I'm really excited about is then sitting down with Gwen and Tori and having them critically look at how we collect and measure and report out our economic impact and our social impacts, and getting better at telling a better story about this. So these kinds of connections are just so incredible.
This is what we're trying to do with Main Street Canada and Measuring Main Street. Both of those sites have been posted in the chat. We're trying to show the economic value of what's generated off of Main Street. And Main Street is just a proxy for local. 75 or 80% of the population works in a business attached to a main street. And people just don't realize it's so significant, right? Gwen, what do you think? What's your gut telling you?
Well, of course, I think we're on the right track for us. And especially through working together and learning from each other too. It's an exciting takeaway. But the Shortfast Institute for Place-Based Economies that we're building is all about shifting our mindsets from a ground-up, place-first perspective. So tethering capital closer to the places we live, and being able to start our economic development approaches, again, from the places we live with the assets that we have, and going from there to develop. So economic nutrition is one of many tools trying to tether capital, and as well as tethering everything closer to place. And I think you brought up a good point at the end. You'll see with none of our businesses have a 100% spend target on Fogo Island. That's never going to be a goal, as much as we'd love to put a vineyard on Fogo Island. It's well, maybe with the weather, who knows in a few years if that's going to become possible, but at least right now it's never going to be. So it's about building out those dense supply chain networks, as opposed to chains, but really networks, building and growing and strengthening those. And then tracking and being able to share our story through presenting tangible data that people can see.
These are all about tools and motivation and inspiration, and also just to be aware, I always feel this, that when you feel hopeless, which a lot of people can feel, they can feel overwhelmed and hopeless, just try to get yourself out into an environment where you're aware of people around you and what they're doing, and you'll find something remarkable within not a very far distance from where you are, if we just open our eyes to it. Tori, what about you? What's your gut telling you?
I think we're 100% on the right track. I think the challenge and the opportunity is, how do we scale this? We are having these conversations. We are passionate about this. So many communities are. But if we look at, the business section in the Globe and Mail, are they talking about this? Maybe they're talking about local, but they're not talking about social procurement and all of these solutions in the way that they need to be. So I think we need to be advocating and holding businesses accountable that we shop with, our communities, our politicians, all accountable, so that we can create an economy that works for everybody.
There you are. You heard it here first on City Talk. Thanks for joining us. the work we always say that the City Talk, it's never the end of the conversation, it's just the beginning. Thank you all three for the work that you're doing to highlight and make visible to us what often is not as visible as we need it to be, so we can actually start seeing. On that theme, just to say that next week we are doing a City Talk to celebrate the legacy of Jane Jacobs, who was all about seeing and observing, and in fact, import replacement, which is what you were just describing, Tori, the anecdote about the product that they were getting from the US and they could replace. That is a Jane Jacobs observation that she made about how economies grow, import replacement. So next week we'll be talking about Jane's Walk, the great legacy, and Jane Jacobs. And I always encourage people, just know she wrote more than just one book. She wrote The Death and Life of Great American Cities, but she also wrote The Economy of Cities. And it's not just about cities, it's about places. So read that. Why not? Between now and next Thursday when we do that, there's a couple of other sessions that are coming up, one on encampments with the shift and about temporary housing. So really pleased to have you all here to join us to talk once again about why the local matters. And delighted, Tori, Gwen, Mary. Thanks for joining us. And thanks everybody in the chat. Always great to be with you. See you next time.